WADR. Promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, Senegal. Good afternoon and many thanks for staying tuned to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and all around the world on WADR.org. Welcome to Newslink, and here are the top stories. The International Criminal Court begins trial of Malian jihadist leader for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Timbuktu. Dozens of women abducted by armed men as tension heightens in Cameroon's northwestern region. In Ghana, a coalition of 29 civil society organizations call for the removal of the GNPC CEO over the alleged sale of 50% stake.
We demand the immediate removal of GNPC CEO Opoku Ahwene Dankwa and the board chairman Freddie W. Blay from their respective positions, as they have become a threat to Ghana's interest in the petroleum sector.
And UN condemns failure of heads of state in safeguarding civilians amid ongoing conflicts.
Last November, states adopted a political declaration to protect civilians by restricting or refraining from the use of explosive weapons in populated areas. But the terrible truth is that the world is failing to live up to its commitments to protect civilians.
Please stay with us for details of these stories and more.
Here is James Adjapong with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining us. Let's begin in Senegal, as judges overseeing the rape trial of opposition leader Ousmane Sonko have been asked by the public prosecutor to charge him with the said criminal offense. The prosecutor also asked that Sonko be sentenced to 10 years in prison. The opposition leader, 48, is accused of sexually assaulting and making death threats to a woman who worked in a massage parlor in 2021. He has reportedly denied any wrongdoing and on different occasions boycotted court proceedings. The public prosecutor called on judges to sentence Sonko to 10 years in prison for rape or 5 years for moral corruption and a fine equivalent to over $3,300 if the rape charge was not upheld. However, Sonko's lawyers were unable to speak on his behalf due to his absence, which also means he will not be able to appeal if convicted. The case was adjourned for deliberation and a verdict is expected on June 1st, 2023. In Mali, the International Criminal Court on Tuesday commenced the trial of Malian jihadist Al-Hassan Ag Abdul Mohamed. Al-Hassan is facing charges for his involvement in crimes against humanity and war crimes during the occupation of Timbuktu in northern Mali by Ansar Dine and ACME between 2012 and 2013. The prosecutor said Al-Hassan headed a police force created by the group that tormented the city, especially women who were subjected to rape, forced marriages, and sexual slavery. More details with Tawfiq Abdul Nasir.
The prosecution presented compelling evidence against Al-Hassan, including his own inadvertent contribution to providing evidence of his crimes. The abundance and quality of the evidence are deemed sufficient to secure a conviction against the accused. Notably, the prosecutor highlighted that there are 39 police reports in the case file, all of which were written and signed by Al-Hassan himself. The prosecutor, Gilles Deter, revealed the existence of videos within the case file, clearly showing the jihadists inflicting lashes upon a young man and denying mercy to a defenseless woman on the ground. Although the prosecutor did not present images of the killing, he did inform the three judges of their existence. Gilles extensively addressed the heinous crimes committed against girls and women during the 10-month occupation. These innocent individuals were hunted down in the street and even within the confines of their homes. They were subjected to sexual violence, including rape, and in some cases forced into slavery. These atrocities further compound the gravity of the charges against Al-Hassan. The ongoing legal proceedings aim to hold Abdelaziz Al-Hassan accountable for his alleged role in the crimes committed in Timbuktu. The prosecution's comprehensive presentation of evidence serves to shed light on the acts perpetrated by the accused and seeks justice for the victims affected by these brutal actions.
Tofik Abdul Nasir filed that report. We head to Cameroon, where a disturbing incident confirms the abduction of at least 30 women by a group of armed men in the Mezam, the northwestern region. The prefect of the area, Simone Emily Moore, officially verified this information with emphasis that the abduction took place in the village of Kejom Keku, also known as Bek Babanki, within the Tuba district of the Mezam department during the early hours of Monday. As Ogeo Biarika, the report, the local population in the Mezam prefecture is facing increased tensions due to the activities of terrorists who are targeting the community.
Simon Emil Mood, the prefect of Mezam, reported that the day before, a group of elderly women and members of a secretive society known as Takombangs organized a peaceful march. Their objective was to protest against the brutal acts committed by terrorists, which have inflicted immense suffering on the communities. One of the key issues fueling the unrest is the imposition of a war tax by separatist groups. The local population vehemently opposes this tax, seeing it as an additional burden amidst the already challenging circumstances they face. The tax has further strained the relationship between the separatists and the affected communities. The day after the National Day of Unity celebrations on May 20, 2023, a university teacher fell victim to the escalating violence in the region. This incident occurred merely 2 weeks after the targeted assassination of a journalist, further exacerbating the atmosphere of insecurity and fear. The northwest and southwest regions, which are predominantly English-speaking areas in Cameroon, have been grappling with the Anglophone crisis since October 2016. This protracted crisis has plunged the regions into a state of turmoil, resulting in a bloody conflict. Both separatist groups and government forces have been involved in the violence, leading to significant loss of life and displacement. According to the United Nations, the conflict has already claimed the lives of over 3,000 people, with nearly 700,000 individuals forced to flee their homes in search of safety and stability.
Ogeo Biarika filed that report.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
If you are just tuning in, this is Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM. We head to Niger, where the meningitis epidemic has killed 102 people, mostly children, out of more than over 1,000 recorded cases. The Nigerian Ministry of Health on Monday indicated on its official website that the number was accumulated since January 2023. It specified that the southern region, Zenda, bordering Nigeria, is the most affected with more than 1,470 cases and 84 deaths. Abdullahi Hassan completes the story.
In addition to the ongoing epidemic in the Nigerian state of Jigawa, there is a pressing concern about the potential for the international spread of the disease. The World Health Organization, WHO, has been closely monitoring the situation since early February, recognizing the need for urgent intervention to prevent further transmission. Responding to the escalating crisis, the Nigerian authorities have taken swift action. Despite already grappling with a significant number of meningitis cases, they recently launched a comprehensive vaccination campaign to mitigate the impact of the outbreak. This proactive approach aims to contain the spread of the disease and protect vulnerable populations. Minister of Public Health, Population and Social Affairs, Idi Ilyasu Menasara, has been at the forefront of these efforts. Taking to social media, he communicated the official commencement of the vaccination campaign in Zindar. This strategic decision aims to cover a substantial portion of the population with a targeted focus on individuals aged 2 to 29 who are particularly susceptible to the disease. With 372,000 people falling within the targeted age range, the authorities said they are leaving no stone unturned in the efforts to curb the outbreak's impact. By implementing widespread immunization measures, they are aiming to create a protective shield around the vulnerable population, ensuring that the epidemic does not further spiral out of control.
Abdullahi Hassan further to report. In Ghana, a coalition of 29 civil society organizations operating within the energy sector has united in a call for the swift removal of the Chief Executive Officer and Board Chairman of the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC. These CSOs include prominent organizations such as the Africa Center for Energy Policy, ACEP, Center for Democratic Development, CDD Ghana, Chamber of Petroleum Consumers Ghana, COPEC, Imani Center for Policy and Education, and 25 others. Their collective accusation against the two individuals revolves around their alleged actions that are perceived to be detrimental to the state's interests. Accra correspondent Atiawine Lawson brings us more details.
The demand for the removal of Opoku Dankwa, the Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC, and Freddie Blay, the board chairman, arises from the recent revelation that the corporation intends to sell a 50% stake in Jubilee Holdings Limited, which represents Ghana's oil stake, to Petrol SA, a South African company. This decision has raised concerns as it undermines the significant revenue potential that this interest holds for the state of Ghana. Freddie Blay, in his capacity as the GNPC board chair, allegedly reached out to Petro SA, offering them an equal split in the interest. This move has prompted criticism, and during a press conference on Tuesday, Abdul Karim Mohammed, the coordinator for the coalition, highlighted the potential risks to Ghana's interests due to the continued presence of these individuals who have close ties to the petroleum operations for the state.
We demand the immediate removal of GNPC CEO Opoku Dankwa and the board chairman Freddie W. Blay from their respective positions, as they have become a threat to Ghana's interest in the petroleum sector.
In response to the accusations raised by the coalition of civil society organizations and concerns regarding impropriety, Mr. Freddie Blay, the chief executive of GNPC and former chairman of the governing New Patriotic Party, dismissed the allegations, stating that the CSOs are engaged in malicious activities.
The civil society organizations, with a very respect, they have all come together, orchestrated, and have asked that the CEO, and including myself, should be asked to step down. I'm surprised at them, based on which fact, the basis for which they are asking this, and unless, of course, I get convinced that somebody is doing some pure mischief.
Meanwhile, Dr. Matthew Opoku Prempeh, the Minister for Energy for Ghana, has expressed objection to the transaction proposed by the GNPC and has instructed the chairman to halt any further progression of the deal. Reporting for Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, I am Atiewin Mbila Lawson in Accra.
You are listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM, Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. The International Criminal Court begins trial of Malian jihadist leader for war crimes and crimes against humanity in Timbuktu. Dozens of women abducted by armed men as tension heightens in Cameroon's northwestern region. In Ghana, a coalition of 29 civil society organizations call for the removal of the GNPC CEO over the alleged sale of 50% stake. And UN condemns failure of heads of state in safeguarding civilians amid ongoing conflict. Still ahead, we have our newspaper review, guest interview, and some sports updates. Kindly stay with us.
You are listening to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal.
It's 30 minutes past 12 in our studios here. This is West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM. Remember, we are streaming all around the world on WADR.org. In an alarming declaration, the United Nations Organization has expressed deep concern over the West's failure to uphold its commitment to safeguarding civilians, a fundamental obligation outlined in international humanitarian law. During a council meeting on Tuesday, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres emphasized that nations involved in conflict must adhere to the principles enshrined in international humanitarian law. Guterres drew attention to the latest conflict in Sudan, where a violent confrontation between rival generals has persisted over 5 weeks. Guterres underscored that the consequences of warfare extend to a surge in food insecurity, with more than 117 million people facing acute hunger, primarily due to impacts of war and instability in 2022.
Last November, states adopted a political declaration to protect civilians by restricting or refraining from the use of explosive weapons in populated areas. I urge all states to join and turn the declaration into meaningful action. And in December, the Security Council adopted Resolution 2664, which aims to prevent United Nations sanctions from arming civilians and obstructing humanitarian action. I urge all states to implement it and to exclude humanitarian and medical activities from their own counterterrorism and sanctions measures. Mr. President, these modest steps are welcome, but the terrible truth is that the world is failing to live up to its commitments to protect civilians, commitments enshrined in international humanitarian law. The Geneva Conventions of 1949 and their additional protocols are the cornerstone of that legal framework. And I pay tribute to the work of the International Committee of the Red Cross, the guardian of those treaties. You meet danger and brutality with bravery, compassion and humanity, and you will always have my full support. The ICRC's role is unique. It has a mandate to respond, and that mandate must be respected by every government, every armed group and every fight. Mr. President, we must never lose sight of the meaning and purpose of international humanitarian law. It is the difference between life and death, between restraint and anarchy, between losing ourselves in horror and retaining our humanity. But law overlooked is law undermined. We need action and accountability to ensure it is respected, and that depends on political will. Peace is the best form of protection. We must intensify our efforts to prevent conflict, protect civilians, preserve peace, and find political solutions to war.
Antonio Guterres is UN Chief.
This is the newspaper review. Stay on top of the news. Get the most important stories with added insight and concise review.
This is the newspaper review.
Up next, we have our press stories from Maju with WADR Sankole Janko.
Hello there, welcome to this edition of the press review. Coming to you from Banjul, the Gambia, I am Sankule Janko. Let's begin the press review with the Point newspaper because they have a very interesting story with regard to the conflict going on in Senegal. One particular person, of course, that is the leader of the MFDC rebels. And it says, Salif Sajo still alive. Family denies Wolf TV death claim. State witness testifies behind curtains. Auditor says stakeholders should act on findings. Gambia expects rainfall in early June. Minister Ju says military coups provoke instability. Let's quickly move on to the Standard newspaper. And the Standard newspaper's lead story has to do with an advice to President Adama Barrow. And it reads, Sidat Job tells President to dissolve cabinet and call opposition to round table meeting. This has to do with the current performance by the National People's Party, who suffered heavy losses in the recent mayoral elections, particularly in the Greater Banjul areas. And Sidat Job, a renowned diplomat and a respected diplomat, has called on the Gambian president to dissolve his cabinet while called on the opposition for a dialogue. Well, with regard to the false lead story on the Point newspaper, Standard also carried this story, but on a different note because it says confusion over reported death of MFDC leader. That's what the Standard is reporting. IGP urged to prioritize building public trust. Afrexim Bank to commit $500 million to revive Gambia's agriculture. And this other story reads, Action Man calls Barrow to action. Indeed. We move on to the Fourier newspaper, whose lead story has to do with the audit reports, and it says Director of Audit unearths more irregularities in councils. Still with councils, this one reads, councils spend on deposited bank revenues. This is another interesting one, and it reads, Senegambia Bridge construction valued at $4 billion. That is according to this report. The Senegambia Bridge is a bridge that links southern and northern Gambia. Of course, it is also a very important bridge for West Africa, as hundreds of West Africans crisscross this bridge from southern Senegal to the Senegalese capital, Dakar, via the southern bank and the northern bank. We move on to the final newspaper for today, and that is the Voice newspaper. Their lead story says, COPG chairman urges elected mayors and chairpersons to fulfill campaign promises. And this other story has to do with just concluded mayoral elections, and it reads, over 46% of voter population turned out for election, GP report indicates. These are the major stories making the headlines, and it's back to you in the studio.
Thank you, Sankule, for that newspaper review.
Politics,
Analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is The Guest.
The guest segment takes us back to Ghana, where a coalition of 29 civil society organizations operating within the energy sector is calling for the swift removal of the Chief Executive Officer and Board Chairman of the Ghana National Petroleum Corporation, GNPC. Allegations leveled against two individuals revolve around the alleged actions sale of a 50% stake of Ghana's Jubilee Holding Limited to Petro SA, a South African company. DCSO say the sale, if finalized, would be detrimental to the state's interest. Our guest, Duncan Amwa, Executive Director of the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers Ghana, COPEC, speaks on some concerns that need to be addressed by the government in this process. Legal instruments, Amwa says, are equally essential and must be considered by the Ghanaian government when it involves such contractual agreements that are of national standing. Our guest joins us from Accra.
So to start with, when you have income or revenue accrue to a country, the things you use the revenue for is budgetary support, infrastructural development, and then you also keep some of these monies for future generations who may not benefit the resources that we are today exploring. And so when you have these three things come together, you would expect that the resource would give you a recurrent revenue, so that if today oil prices are $100 a barrel, there's some amount of revenue to be recorded from your share of the oil produced. If it goes to $120 a barrel, that revenue would likely marginally go up. For anyone to seek to, as it is, collateralize or sell future revenues expected to accrue to a state can only be criminal, can only amount to selling the future of our unborn children who may benefit from roads, may benefit from schools, may benefit from healthcare facilities that we probably could set up in the near future with these revenues or resources. Unfortunately, it looks as though Ghana is in a hurry at this point to just sell off a share that should legitimately and rightfully, 7% share that should come to Ghana. We're in a hurry to trade that off for the convenience of today. And that the civil society front in Ghana is vehemently opposed to, and we are calling for not only a cessation or a withdrawal, but also a dismissal of persons spearheading this process.
So that being said, have the government yet made claims as to why they think this might save the petroleum sector yet? Or for CSOs, even if it's so, do you opine there is a management approach that can save this situation?
What I can put on record tentatively is that the government itself is not in support, as the Energy Minister for Ghana has rightfully intimated in a response to GNPC that this is clearly not in the national interest, and is directing that any such deal or dealings be seized forthwith. And so you get a very good impression that as a government, the state itself is not in a hurry to go on the tangent that these board members and management of Ghana National Petroleum Corporation are embarking upon, and for which the minister has in a strongly worded letter directed that that deal should not be followed through because it wouldn't inure to the benefit of the country. That we think is the government position that we as CSOs also support as the rightful, legitimate position. As to whether these board members will still be left to function such that they can use a backdoor approach to do any other bit that may not inure to the benefit of the country, only the president will have that decision to make.
So finally, should the government insist on the sale, what legal structures would you advise be factored in when it involves such contractual agreements that are of national standing?
As a matter of fact, we are opposed to it completely. And so we are not even sure that we want to clean it up or we want to advise on how to go about it the right way. Resources and revenues that would accrue to future generations, future government, reprobate and approbate today, decide what to take today, and then for tomorrow when they need these resources to develop, there's nothing left for them. We are opposed to this in totality, and we think that it should just be withdrawn forthwith as the minister has rightfully directed.
Duncan Amwa is the Executive Director of the Chamber of Petroleum Consumers Ghana, COPEC. And now to some sports update. Benin is a step closer to securing qualification to the next phase of WAFU BU Under-20 Girls Cup of Nations. After a thumping Côte d'Ivoire 5-2 on Tuesday, Benin edged their West African rivals in the Group A encounter after an impressive performance at the Baba Yara Stadium in Kumasi, Ghana. This was a much-needed result for the Beninese to get their campaign back on track after a 3-0 defeat by host Ghana in their opener. They went into the break with a 2-goal cushion before adding extra 3 goals to take the tally to 5. Côte d'Ivoire, meanwhile, will hope to bounce back from their defeat when they take on host Ghana in the final group match. And that's it for sport. We have come to the end of this edition of Newslink from West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening. And many thanks to our listeners in the Gambia via Hot 104.3 FM and in Liberia via Alternative Youth Radio 98.9 FM Lofa County and in Ghana on Royals FM 104.7 Wenchi. Christian Mukidi has been exceptional on the console. Many thanks to Mustafa Sek for our Facebook live coverage. Do interact with us via social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram at WADR News and on Facebook West Africa Democracy Radio English service. Coming up at the bottom of the hour, it's a rebroadcast of our agenda program 50-50 with Atia Win, Bella Laws, and I am James Adjapong. Good afternoon.
News, talk,
music.
Get it all 24 hours on West Africa Democracy Radio
94.9.